Welcome to the Girl Dad Show.
Welcome to the Girl Dad Show, a professional parenting podcast. Each month, I interview entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals who are balancing parenthood, life, and profession in the hopes to learn what it takes to be an amazing professional parent. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Girl Dad Show. Today, I had Garrett on the show. He is a longtime friend. I used to work with him when he was a co-founder at Limelight Health that eventually got acquired. And we just went all the way back to the beginning. And it was an amazing episode learning about his childhood, all the life trials and tribulations, and how he's applying his love for art and parenting and insurance and mixing all of these different things together. He's one of the most interesting people you'll ever meet, and I can't wait for you to check out his episode. Garrett, what is going on? Thank you so much for joining me on my show today.
Thank you, Young. It's a pleasure to be connecting and catching up with you, my friend.
I know. It has been years since we have talked. Years, actually. Probably 3 or 4. Yeah, it's been a really long time.
A few years.
Yeah, I'm glad to be catching up on the show. This is going to be great. So tell the listeners, I already know you, but I don't know what you're working on. So tell the listeners what you've been working on and then what you're working on now, because I know you went through a big change.
Yeah. So, well, as of January 1st, kind of marks the turning of a page for me. I co-founded Limelight Health. We were acquired 2 years ago. And for the last 2 years or so, I've been at FINEOS as our chief evangelist and bard. Which is an interesting title we may talk about. And now I'm like 2 weeks in to the new year, and I've transitioned, and I'm looking at what I want to do when I grow up. Now,
you don't want to be a bard when you grow up? What's going on?
I do actually. Actually, I do. I've been kind of doubling down on storytelling. A bard is, a storyteller, a minstrel, a poet. I have a musical background, right? So that's kind of how I got the bard, because I was writing songs about insurance, and I write songs about my life and even parenting stuff you'll hear about. So anyways, that's what I was doing, demoing our product and going to conferences and just connecting, being relational with people in our industry, our customers.
Yeah.
So, there was like a part of what I was doing too, is we were hosting virtual concerts. We started them at Limelight, and then at FINEOS we continued. So that was a part of what I was doing too. It was internal culture, but also connecting with the insurance industry around music. Music is medicine was the term that we used a lot. So that's what I was doing. Now there's this wonderful great unknown in 2023. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. I mean, I know during our time at Limelight, it was like the most amazing part of the journey is that like you made something that was so dry. I mean, and so, gosh, I can say it now. It was really boring. It was really boring. I mean, it was just the driest industry to be in. And like, you would just come in and like rip these awesome, like musical riffs about insurance. And it was just so random and hilarious and good. And like, just broke down this stuffy space, and you did such a good job of like making it so enjoyable by equalizing it, right? The weight of how serious and boring it was with just how ridiculous and awesome it was just to jam out songs.
Well, my thing was always, because I'm very mission based, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to make people get goosebumps, and I want to make them laugh. Like, and music is powerful. Obviously, just us connecting as humans and can do that as well. So, like, we did a song. The last song I did was called "Making Copies." I don't know if you saw that.
I did. Yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah,
I got a budget to video this thing, and we released it at InsurTech Connect 2 years ago. And it was like Saturday Night Live, Rob Schneider. Yeah. It was, oh my gosh, that was so much fun. And it was telling the story of the employee benefits industry.
Yeah.
It was, so yeah, that's some of the stuff, like music stuff. I am working on some projects though, that maybe I could give a summary of.
Please, I want to know everything. Yeah. What are you working on now? What are the big projects you're working on now? Now that you're not doing bardship at, a publicly traded insurance technology company, now what do you do from that, right?
Well, so a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, I released a Christmas song. So that was a project that I was working on. It's called Run, Mary, Run. It's definitely not your normal Christmas song. It's from King Herod. If you read the Christmas story, right? King Herod hears about this little baby and ends up, trying to find the baby to kill the baby because he's the king. And anyway, so it's called Run, Mary, Run, and it's from King Herod's perspective. So I'm in this storytelling kind of bard experience with my songwriting, which I'm enjoying, and I'm going to release in March a 3-song Celtic Saints. I'm fascinated by, FINEOS was based in Dublin that acquired us, which was just a gift. And 10 years ago, I started writing songs about Celtic saints. Saint Brendan traveled across the Atlantic Ocean into the great unknown. It's an epic story. Saint Patrick. So on St. Patrick's Day, I'm going to release this 3-song EP. And
That's
so,
awesome.
yeah, with 3 songs about 3 Celtic saints that have really deep, powerful parallels in life, parenting, business. I mean, so I'm excited about that. And I've actually been, not to just stick on the music train, but I'm fascinated on the ambient music opportunity. I play this instrument called the hammer dulcimer.
Oh yeah, it's super rad.
And I run it through a delay pedal, and I got this really cool reverb pedal for Christmas. And it's very ambient, and I'm wanting to focus on mental health, right? And think about wellness. And I'm even thinking about just testing it out and showing up at some startups and having like airplane mode session, deep thinking, no Slack, nothing, and just listen to some ambient music. And it creates an atmosphere for creativity, an atmosphere to go deep. So I'm thinking about ways to continue to be authentic. As you know, music was a part of who I was at Limelight. And so I'm finding, ways to continue to do that. I am doing a few insurance things, stealth mode on a PEO, Master Health Plan Insights little platform. So I'm noodling in the PEO space.
Wow.
And yeah, and Jason and I have been talking about, getting some of the band back together. We're talking about doing some stuff together too, which you'll probably hear about soon.
Yeah.
Love Jason, and pleasure to continue to work with him.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah. He's been kind of on this journey of figuring out what's after Limelight for a little longer than you.
Yeah.
I think he's
right.
he's like 6 months ahead of you?
6 months in. Yeah.
Yeah. 6 months ahead of you. So I have to ask, I mean, what's making you leave? Is it the musical inclination, or like, is it just time, or what happened?
Yeah. I think it's, over 2 years, which was my original commitment. And I'm just hungry to build something. I'm hungry to do some music. I'm hungry to regain a bit of my my rhythm.
Yeah.
Because we're based in Dublin. It's kind of 8 hours ahead, which means
you're 8 hours ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 hour, 5 a.m. meetings, 6 a.m. meetings, and I'm not complaining. It was a season of where I'm trying to get back to a morning rhythm that is good for family and also for work and just my own soul. And then I'm hungry to create culture again. And
you're a builder.
From that, so I'm back to the grind in looking at what's next, and I'm excited. But again, it's this fusion. I mean, blockchain is stuff that I'm really looking at as well. Which we'll talk about our kids. My middle son's kind of got me into that space, and so looking at insurtech, employee benefits distribution, blockchain, Web3 stuff, and then music. Like those are kind of my 3 buckets that I'm looking at. But I'm definitely in a season of just turning over rocks and trying to connect. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome, man. What a great state to be in. That's really, really fascinating. And it's so funny because you've always kind of been like that. Like everyone's always like, wait, what? But you know what? I've also realized that you've always figured out a way to stitch everything together too. So I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now you figured out a way to do a blockchain music insurance play or something like that.
Dude, that is the perfect storm, man. It's all coming together.
That's
all
right.
roads.
That's right. If anyone can figure out how those 3 things sync together, it's going to be you, Garrett. Yeah.
You may be right, my friend. The other, I'll just call out the other big project.
Yeah.
And it's not a project. It's a life journey. Is my wife and I are celebrating 25 years.
Oh wow.
This September. Yeah. So
congratulations.
That's obviously a big part of my focus, and that relates into parenting and all that. So I'm excited that this is a big year for us.
It's a big milestone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
That's veteran status. Yeah. So yeah, let's jump into it. So tell me about your kids. Tell the listeners about your kids. How many do you have? And now we know that you've been married for 25 years. That sets you at a level higher than most people, right? Like you made it.
I'm like, silver. It's a silver. I'm thinking I get a silver medal for 25 years. I feel like, something more than that. So we have 3 kids. We got started really young, which has its pros and cons.
Right.
Our oldest is Judah. He's 21 years old. So I literally just a little while ago, we sat down and I ordered him a beer, and we drank a beer and talked about life. And it's a new season, turning of a page,
Wow.
when
That's
your kids
wild.
hit 21. Yeah. So he's working, teaching snowboarding at Mount Shasta, the ski park.
Nice.
Which
That's
is cool.
rad.
It's one thing that I'll say I am so proud of, that all my kids can shred on the snow.
Dope.
And
that's awesome.
It's a beautiful thing to now, when they're young, you're carrying them up. I mean, you're in the trench. It's trench warfare on the hill, carrying them up the hill. I mean, they're cold, they're screaming, they're crying. It's brutal. Now we just have a blast, and it's a point of connection for us. So Judah's 21. Gabriel is 19, and he's the one that got the blockchain bug. He's an NFT guru. He just moved down to Santa Monica.
Wow.
This last year, and he's working with a number of startups bringing Web3. We call it Web 2.5, where it's not Never Land Web3. It's really like Web 2 in between Web 3. And he was the youngest speaker at NFT NYC 2 years ago, which is a big conference in New York. And I got to go see him last year. So he's definitely got the startup bug. And I pushed him off the cliff at a startup weekend when he was 12 years old. And that really was a part of what changed the trajectory for him. And I can see that. So it's powerful to see how a moment or an experience with a kid can change their whole course. Yeah. So proud of him. And then Scarlett's our little princess. She's 16.
Yeah.
Just got her license, junior in high school, and she's racing on the snowboard team up here at Mount Shasta.
Wow.
Which is, so we're going to be spending a lot of time the next few months up here with her racing and practices.
That's amazing. So I'm assuming Scarlett still lives with you, and does you just said
the boys moved out.
They both moved out.
Yeah, they both moved out.
Oh wow! So you're kind of like empty.
We're almost empty nesters. I'm 44, and I'm 44, and I'll be an empty nester, be like late 45. So
wow.
Yeah.
But does Scarlett want to leave when she graduates too?
Well, she's not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking through that. I'm more want her to go experience, go do some and travel abroad, take a leap year. And, she loves animals, right? So we talked about, does she want to go to some animal sanctuary, somewhere where you could take your animals and just, spread your wings a bit.
Yeah.
So we'll see. She may go to the college locally here, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, plenty of time to figure that out. That's like at least 2 years. Hey, this is something that I don't know if I've ever asked you before, but what was your childhood like? How did you grow up?
Well, it's a bit complicated, young. We were born in Chicago, but then moved to Santa Monica, and when I was young, and parents actually met in Scientology, which is an interesting place to meet, place to hang out. Not here to judge, but they ended up getting divorced when I was 3, just about 3. I have one little brother, 2 years younger than me, and then my mom a few years later she remarried. And he kind of Chuck raised me. He was a Vietnam vet, so we kind of had this Brady Bunch family. I got a new stepbrother, Island, and a stepsister, Roby, and my brother. So we Brady Bunch. And it was interesting, journey. My stepdad was a Vietnam vet, so he struggled with PTSD. And it almost, ended their marriage. They ended up having a big spiritual faith encounter that, you know, saved this shipwreck that was my parents talk about when I was young, probably 8, 9 years old. They're both entrepreneurial. They both started writing books. My stepdad, you know, wrote a book about PTSD. And we would hang out with Vietnam vets that literally we'd go camping out with them. And he ended up running Point Man International, which was this, you know, it helped vets that had PTSD deal with life.
Wow.
And it was heavy. I mean, we would go into the woods up in Okanagan, up in Washington. And I remember we'd bring supplies, socks, blankets, and these vets would come out of the woods. They literally lived off grid. I'm not talking the cool hipster off grid stuff. I'm talking off grid, and they couldn't. They literally checked out from the world, and they'd come down, get supplies. We talk to them, feed them, and my heart was, you know, it was a really deep experience for me of empathy. You know, trying to connect with someone that was an outcast, if you will. A lot of these Vietnam vets were kids, and when they went to war, and it's a different world than now. You fight. You're playing video games, so they were kids, and to come back and, you know, so that was very much impacted my upbringing. My parents both wrote books. They started a publishing company, which I had worked for. It was a Christian book publishing company, self-publishing. My mom was she was great at sales. Her dad, my grandpa, it's a long line of sales, and I kind of got that gene a bit too. Yeah. Which I'm grateful for. Yeah. So my grandpa was like the, you know, VP Encyclopedia Britannica, door-to-door sales. Wow. And he was the guy, the guru at Encyclopedia Britannica for selling, and led to their biggest sales year ever in the history of Encyclopedia Britannica. So that was kind of passed down to my mom, and then my mom passed that down to me. But up into high school, like, I wanted to play professional baseball. Like, as I was growing up, that was what I wanted to do. I'm a catcher. I'm seeing the field. Yeah. I loved it. I think it was my absolute dream to play professional baseball. Wow. But, you know, sometimes we don't make good decisions. And then we see how those decisions basically change the trajectory of our lives. And it's all used for good, I think, ultimately, right? But I, you know, started hanging out with friends that wanted to smoke pot and drink and party and do all this other stuff that was super distracting from my mission to play professional baseball. So I ended up going to a college playing baseball, but that ultimately changed my path from my baseball journey. And then I had a big spiritual encounter when I was 18, and that basically changed. And I never played music before 18. Oh, wow. Didn't grow up playing music at all. You went from jock to artist. Well, I was into skateboarding and snowboarding and baseball. So I was definitely like border / baseball player. That's crazy. You didn't play music before 18. No. And my spiritual encounter, basically, I picked up a guitar and just started singing songs at our church and leading worship. Like, that was my entry into music land. And I really had to fight at the chops for music. I went to a music school later in life and learned theory. And that was not early on. It was later in my life. So my wife and I got married at 20. So the upbringing, like, at 20, I was married. Wow. Yeah. You're escalating a lot of these activities and milestones, in the midst of you trying to figure out who you are, and like not being an athlete and then moving to music, and then 2 years later you're married. Yeah. It was, got married at 20. It was a gnarly, being vulnerable story of my parents ended up basically joining a cult. And, so at 20, like, first year marriage, my parents basically didn't talk to me, and it was 13 years of brutal difficulty and pain, losing my parents. So talk about parenting. It was all in the name of, God. It was a very difficult thing to journey through for me, trying to be a man and a father and a husband of faith, but seeing the experience from my parents ultimately. So fast forward the story, my mom came out like 9 years ago. Oh, wow. And so it's this great, there is a redemptive story to this, and it's but very complicated and messy, and, focused on, rebuilding relationship with a parent when I'm in my 30s and 40s. So
Wow.
that really was what was the catalyst where we moved from Washington to California. And then I was a worship pastor. I got a master's in spiritual formation before we did Limelight or anything. Before I did any of this stuff in the tech startup world, I got a master's in spiritual formation and worship studies. Yeah, it was a fascinating journey.
You really go deep when you go into stuff. It sounds like when you like latch onto something, you kind of go in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't realize that these were all like stages in your life. It's fascinating to hear you actually talk about these like chapters that you're opening and closing versus like, oh, I've always played music and it's always been a passion of mine. It's like, no, you were almost like religiously inclined for a little bit even, and then sports. And then, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. When I did my master's, I transitioned from doing a lot of music within the kind of church context to playing out a lot after my master's, playing instrumental music in wineries and bars and restaurants and weddings. I did tons of weddings. And then I did it was part of my thesis work, this big Christmas show. And we raised money for this, orphanage in Ethiopia. And then another year we did, it was raising money for this human trafficking nonprofit. So I was always mashing up, trying to do good with music and try to be a good bard, a good storyteller, in this case of, the Christmas story.
Yeah.
It was on PBS. PBS aired it. It was music. That's what I was going to do. And then I lost tons of money. And my kids were young, right? They were like not even over 10 years old. And my wife basically said, hey, maybe we should, pivot.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of, led me ultimately to found Limelight Health. And so it's interesting. But when I was in Limelight, Gabriel, my son, would ask me, Dad, what's the deal? I mean, you didn't even go to school to learn what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You got a master's in Jesus. That's what he calls it. Because this spiritual formation, you got a master's in Jesus. And I say, yeah. And I'm telling you right now, first, if you want to start a business and you've got co-founders that you get married to,
yeah,
and it's not easy. I mean, you've got to have something deeper to keep you from giving up, going AWOL, losing your mind. Because it's just like parenting, honestly. It's very similar to co-founding a company.
It's amazing, man. That's awesome. I had no idea. This is so cool. So then let's talk about the parenting aspect of it. So how much of this wild journey of growing up, and you're very, very I don't even know what adjective do I prescribe to your upbringing here? It seems very adventurous. It's very it seems very I don't know even what adjective to put to it, but how does all of that impact your kids? And do your kids even know your childhood? Do they even know how you grew up? They do.
Yeah. I mean, we went through, my in-laws were such they still are, my wife's parents, for us, they were the rock for us, as in the early, they never lived in Redding where we lived, but we'd go up to Washington and they were always there. But my kids never really, I think by the grace of God, never really asked, Dad, where's your parents? Where's your mom?
Yeah.
And anyways, when that kind of all came out, they heard the story, G-rated or PG-13 version of the story. And my mom's back in my life, and we've been rebuilding. So they do know a bit of the story for sure. I think that's important. It's important. And I know it's a struggle. Parents struggle on how much do we share, not share. But I mean, seeing them build a business, and my mom basically lost the publishing company through this whole cult deal. She ends up starting a new publishing company called Redemption Press. And it's a great story of her coming back to her passion for writing and publishing books. So, seeing her do that, it shows me this desire to continue to build. And that's I brought that into my parenting. I'm building through different phases as a parent and as an entrepreneur.
That's awesome. And then what do your kids think that you did as a bard at obviously did more than sing at FINEOS. You were also an amazing evangelist. I mean, you definitely made it very, very fun for the sales team to expand, different clients and stuff. But all jokes aside, like, what do they think that you do, like, for a living, and how do they perceive you even transitioning like this? Because that's kind of crazy for you to leave. I'm assuming a very lucrative job. Sounds like a great
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to lie. Yeah, it's great. And I loved working. I loved FINEOS and loved the Irish culture. I mean, we
Yeah.
had our first virtual concert. And my kids would see this too. Like, Dad, you're doing a concert? Yeah. It's COVID times. No one can meet in person. Everyone's depressed and stressed out, and kids are jumping off the wall during Zoom meetings and trying to parent. Whether it's like, it was difficult.
Yeah.
So being able to, that was one thing they saw. Anyways, and I brought all the musicians from Dublin together that were FINEOS employees and the Limelight employees, and it was this circle of authenticity and somewhat vulnerable, right? These weren't pro musicians. These are people, as you know, from our journey, that, took a deep breath and maybe never sang a song in front of anyone other than their spouse or, their family, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So the kids saw that. The kids saw me demo a lot too. I demoed our product. I love storytelling. I love demoing software and connecting with customers that have pain points that this software can help solve, right? So that for me was a big part of my role, and my kids, saw that. But they're definitely asking questions, on why, and I walk them through. There's new seasons, right? There's seasons to build, there's seasons to transition, and seasons to let go and build new things and try new things. And it's like St. Brendan, right? I wrote a song about St. Brendan, travels across the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, didn't know about North America in the story, the way that it's told. So he's traveling into the unknown, and he has to let go of the shore that he knows, the land that he knows. And you finally, in the story, he looks forward, doesn't know where he's going, looks back and can't see home. And it's this incredible moment of fear and opportunity to let go and trust, the journey forward based on, our guts. And my wife and I are obviously in agreement on this transition. It's not like I'm doing all this stuff and we're all not on the same page. So we're aligned at the top, and then kids see that, right? So that's, I think, important for them to see that. Otherwise it could be maybe a little unsettling.
Yeah, I could see that, but it sounds like you're actually doing it somewhat intentionally. You actually want them to see that. You want them to see that you can take these moments and turn a page and take a risk and do it again and again and again, which is awesome.
I literally 6 months ago, my son Gabriel had a dream about some blockchain idea. I was literally ready to go start a blockchain company and work with my son. Because he's just phenomenal. He's wicked smart, and he's really a voice, and he's at the tip of the spear with this stuff. So I want to create a world in which those things can happen too, right? So it's trying to, reframe. I'm entering into the second half of my life.
Yeah.
I'm literally about to be an empty nester with adult kids.
Yeah.
So it's this real interesting crossroads for me to think differently about how I build, what I build, and the boundaries in which I build that allow me to continue to parent adult children, which is different, obviously.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. So what does success look like for you now as before, when we're drinking beers with your kids, versus now that they're leaving the nest and getting jobs and starting crypto companies, and, what does that success criteria look like for you? I mean, I'm assuming it's changed a lot.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think I'd say success for me, being able to transition. Now, when I say successfully, I don't mean you got an A. I mean, you didn't give up. Okay. Like, when they're like toddlers or newborn, into toddler, into little preteens, into high school, like all those seasons, you've got tools on the parenting tool belt. And then they go into this new season. And success for me is eventually realizing that those tools don't work in this next season of parenting. So I think that's a big deal for success. The other thing that I'll say, and this has basically led my journey as a parent, which came with a story when Judah was like 3 years old. I was full-time working. at a consumer-driven health insurance startup, and I was going to school all night long. And I was very busy because I didn't go to school when I was 18. I did it later in life.
Yeah.
I came home one day in between changing to go from work to write papers all night. And Judah came in and he wrapped himself around me. He was 3 years old, young. And he says, "Daddy, take your shoes off. Daddy, take your shoes off. Daddy, take your shoes off." And I was, getting ready to leave. And all of a sudden it just blasted me. Right.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of go down to my knees. In his little brain, if he saw Dad's shoes on, he knew Dad was leaving.
Yeah.
If he saw Dad take his shoes off, Dad was staying.
Yeah.
So, success is being able to take your shoes off, be present, right? Maybe it's not literally taking your shoes off, but it's a good, metaphor that kind of drives the point
home. It's a
home.
great metaphor.
So I think that success is being present in the good times, being present in the difficult times. And I have been no A+ parent in that. It's been a journey of continuing to grow. So yeah, I think success is also for me, parenting is continuing to grow. Like that is success, not giving up, just continuing to grow as the seasons transition into new uncharted waters.
That's awesome, man. That's great. So you're kind of just like assessing it and then learning from it as you go. That's a really great mentality. It's a really great mentality. And that's a really great metaphor. I love that metaphor a lot. And it's super powerful. Did you still go write your papers?
I did. Heck yeah. But I've literally been living from that moment, young.
Yeah.
And I bought daddytakeyourshoesoff.com.
Oh, wow.
I have a song that I've written probably 4 times, Daddy Take Your Shoes Off. And it is an anthem that I believe the whole world needs to hear. Yeah. And it's hard. It's one of those songs where so this year, it's one of my goals is to either this year or next year, finish that song.
I can't wait.
It's a big story.
It. It's a really big story. And it's actually even more powerful that you still left. You kept your shoes on and you left.
I took them off. Let's be clear. I took them off and then I put them back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the big struggle I have because my kids are young, right? I'm not, I did the opposite of you. I had my kids very late in life. And so my kids are super young, although we share a similar age. And the tricky thing here is like, how do you show them that you want to be there for the time and the presence and all that stuff? But at the same time, I also want them to see that I'm striving for success. I want them to also not only know what that feels like for me to say, no, I'm going to sacrifice things to win, and also show them that through example and not just conversation, but also balance that with like being a present father and parent, right? Because it's so tricky. It's such a tricky balance. And I struggle with that like every single day.
Yeah.
Do you have any sage advice coming from a 25-year marriage and having grown-up kids?
Well, I think some people would say, I'm always present. I'm at every event. Well, you're physically present, but are you mentally and emotionally present, right? Yeah. So if that's like our bar of success, you may not be present, even though you're present, right? That's real with our marriage or friends or anything, if your mind's on the next thing.
Yeah.
But I think generations too, like if you think about back in the day, like it's hard because our parents had their way in which parenting happened. And you hear, like, I love Sebastian, the comedian, right? And he'll talk about the Italian, his dad. He's like, I met my dad when I was 18. He introduced himself to me. Like he was, working all the time. Right. Or Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary would be like he was like thrown in working, it was like, dude, we're working. I'm not talking to you, go work. So generationally stuff has changed. And so I think it's a balance to what you're saying, right? We want our kids to learn how to work really hard. And if you're just sitting around all day long, like they're going to learn to be present and hang out and connect, but they've got to learn to be productive humans in our world. Because that's somewhat helpful, kind of helps the world go around.
Totally. That's a really great example. I love that analogy. That's amazing. All right. Let me jump into one more question here before we jump into the rapid fire. So How do you qualify and quantify success now? Now that we talked about parenting, how do you qualify work now? Now that you've kind of turned this chapter into what you're trying to do, what does success look like for you moving forward for your next journey here?
Well, so I think, from the last journey of 8 years or so, and again, I've been living in a B2B world, a B2B SaaS world.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about success on the journey, and I'm still very much fascinated in SaaS, so that's, tech focused, B2B, referenceable customers, I think is, whether that's, a direct customer you're selling a sweater to, or, whatever, do they talk about you in a positive manner? That's, to me, a big indicator, right, of success, referenceable customers. And then I would say, obviously if you have a referenceable customer, you're successful because you're actually providing value.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually providing value, and someone's willing to talk about it, right? The other is a referenceable culture, right? And I think about internally as business, like we have to have a team. We can't do everything. So is your culture referenceable? If you have job openings, is your team going out and finding the best talent in their network and willing to say, hey, you need to come join this? Like, and that was a part of what at Limelight, as we scaled, and you were a big part of that. I felt like we made magic, and like the team that we had, that was a referenceable culture.
Yeah.
So that to me is important. And again, referenceable kids. When we talk about parenting, are your kids, good references for you as a parent?
That's really good. That's really good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really good, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, profitability is like very simple, right? Success is either we're profitable or we have a clear pathway and a roadmap to get to profitability. Because at the end of the day, if you're not profitable, unless you're Twitter or, some other big, where you will get that profitability by the sheer volume of the eyeballs you have and attention you have. So I think that is good. And a lot of the success is viewed as raising money. And I think that's changing in our world. As I look in kind of the SaaS world, there's a lot of people bootstrapping, and success is about profitability, not, oh, I raised a lot of money. Well, that introduces a whole lot, as we're aware of, challenges to have to navigate. It's not right or wrong, right? It's just recognizing that we should celebrate the hard route of building slowly too. Like that's success.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, and that also comes from perspective and experience, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think the fact that you've gone through all these different chapters helps you come to this conclusion of the new success criteria. It's beautiful, man. You sound like you're very mature and sophisticated, and you're a lot more settled than you used to be.
You know what?
Yeah.
You know what? Story. Like I was going to do this thing with my son.
Yeah.
And blockchain. So we were kind of moonlighting and having these little pitch deck, and we were kind of sharing this with some blockchain folks. We had this one call, and I called an audible like on the call because I was pitching. And my son came up. He was like, "Dad, what are you doing? You changed the pitch, and what? And all of a sudden, I saw myself with Jason. Jason was our CEO. I was our chief product officer. And then, I was marketing,
all the products,
customer success, sales,
all the departments.
So I saw myself there and thought, oh, wow, I have come away, and I recognize, and I'm aware of the journey I went through at Limelight, learning a ton.
Mm-hmm. And
I called Jason. I said, hey, Jason, I'm sorry. This was, this is like last year. Cause I think I recognize how you might've felt at times on the journey. So with me all excited, I want this feature, give me this feature. Nope. Garrett,
that's so, it's so mature of you to realize that and be able to circle back. That's amazing. Yeah. I hope every early stage Limelighter hears this podcast, because they're going to take that apology to Jason as an apology to themselves as well. You were our wild card. You were our crazy dreamer, but you pushed it. That was needed. It was much needed, but it was definitely, an insane amount of energy. You had just unbelievable energy and ideas. It was palpable. Hey, Garrett, I do want to be conscious of your time, and I do want to make sure I ask every guest the same set of rapid fire questions. So let me move into the rapid fire questions here and get these going. All right. So what advice do you have for other parents and soon to be parents?
I would say literally take your shoes off. I mean, right. Again, do it as an act, understanding that is ultimately a representation of you being present through the journey of parenting, through the good times, through the bad times, right? It's even being present in the bad times is probably more powerful than the good times.
Yeah.
Because you go so deep. So take your shoes off. I'd say get comfortable with the chaos. Get comfortable with the chaos. I mean, my dad, came and saw my kids, visiting, and they were running around. They're like 5, 6, 7 years old. And, and he wasn't there all the time when we were being raised because my mom got remarried, and he's looking at our kids and he's thinking, this is an insane asylum. He's like, listen, if our kids were adults, like it would be an insane asylum.
Yeah.
It is, so you got to get comfortable with the chaos.
Yeah.
And I think you can only die on so many hills as a parent. So think about the hills that you're going to die on, because some of it's like, when you look back, like, it's not worth it. So don't die on every hill. And as parents, there's a lot of books and the parents say this, the in-laws say that, the book says that, there's so much,
yeah,
so much coming at you. You've got to figure it out, take it all in, but synthesize that. And then I would say just, try not to be pressured into parenting by a parent at the school, or, there's all that pressure. We see our kids acting a certain way.
Yeah.
And we're literally going to parent them because we care more about what these people think, that we don't even know them, maybe.
Yeah.
Don't even know them, or at a sporting game or at church or, wherever.
Yeah.
Because we're embarrassed. And we think that we're losers as parents because our kid should be in an insane asylum, and they're like,
This is so interesting because you're the first guest that I've asked this question, and I think it goes both ways for kids or business. I feel like you're talking about your business as well as your kids. I'm listening to you talk and going like, this is how you probably feel about the same advice you give entrepreneurs here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. If you can go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself?
I think other than take your shoes off and stay a while, I would say to embrace patience, to fight for patience. That's always was a big struggle for me, is patience. You have this controlled world. You get married, you're still somewhat controlled environment, right? Kids, I mean, everything is out the door. Schedules. I mean, it's just, you try to get a schedule, but they go AWOL like all the time.
Yeah.
So patience for me is what I would tell myself. Be patient.
Yeah.
And I've struggled. I still struggle with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
So
yeah, it's an awesome one. And it's really funny that you're would tell yourself that, because I feel like, it's something that you are constantly asking people to be patient with you.
I know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's ultimately the golden rule.
Yeah.
As a parent, do to your kids as you would want them or anybody else to do to you. Like, how do you want to be treated? And
that's right.
It's different when you're a grown, hopefully mature adult with these little helpless kids that don't know any better.
That's right.
And it's such a precious, amazing, terrifying, wonderful journey as they experience life and begin to understand the world through, very much through our guidance.
It's awesome. So what's the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
Well, I think I was surprised to see that parenting brought out the best in me.
No, wow, that's awesome.
But it also brought out the worst in me.
Okay. You took me on a journey there. Oh, that's hilarious.
And I think it's a cycle, right? Where that worst has compounded it to drive better, best experiences as a parent. And I'm still on the journey, but definitely those two tensions are, very much surprised me, but we didn't know what we were getting into. Like, we were clueless. 21, 22, having our first kid. Like, it was wild.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. That's crazy, because I was so dumb when I was 20 years old. I was so dumb and not even just like clueless. That's got to be so confusing. Yeah,
it was a blur. Much of it was a blur. So I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then just switch it back to business to bring us home here. What's your favorite business book, or just book actually? All-time favorite book?
Yeah. I listened to your other podcast. You asked this question. I don't really have a favorite book, but, through the SaaS kind of innovation, Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore. Yeah. He's a brilliant writer on all things innovation and technology and understanding the bell curve and how does the real world adopt technology. That one. And then Building a Story Brand, Donald Miller.
Oh yeah. That's a good
storytelling. Those two are big books.
So opposite of each other. One's like so creative and
that's kind of my, so I write left-handed, I eat left-handed, and I throw right-handed and bat right-handed. So I have this left brain, right brain
conflict
makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tension that, super creative, but yet can be super detailed and analytical and get in the weeds.
Crossing the Chasm is very technical, very, very technical business. Yeah. And Donald Miller is like very, very artistic and creative. Yeah. That's really funny that you chose those two. That's great.
As a bard, I figured you got to go with Story Brand. I mean, come on.
Yeah. That's a good one. Donald Miller has a podcast. It's pretty good. It's great.
Oh,
it's awesome. Yeah, it's pretty nice. I listened to a couple episodes. It's really good. And then when you're not being a bard or being this, awesome parent that's on this journey of, discovery and crypto and all this other stuff, what do you do for fun? What's your downtime activities?
So surfing and snowboarding are the two big, and my wife and I love it because we're preparing for the second half of life. So, going to Santa Cruz and surfing and spending a few days there.
It's awesome.
I've got my bros, and we go on one trip. We fly, surf, and you just surf literally till you can't move. You can't move. I mean, you're out in creation. It's just and there's so many parallels to life and business with waves and fear and, overcoming fear. I mean, there's so much there in the water. And then the snowboarding stuff, right? I've gotten in the last 2 years into split boarding. It's backcountry. You could have never got me to hike up a mountain when there's a lift that will take me up wonderfully. But now I'm seeing life differently and understanding the value of the journey and the ascent. So, and it's peaceful. There's nobody there. My wife and I have been snowshoeing. We're up in Mount Shasta right now, Castle Lake and up by Mount Shasta. And it's breathtakingly beautiful. And I'm getting a workout. And then I get to shred down the mountain when I'm done with my hard work.
That's awesome, man. That's a great metaphor for your podcast entirety. That's awesome, man. Garrett, this has been so enjoyable catching up with you. It's like unbelievable, like just to hear your whole story. And I'm like almost apologetic that we've spent so much time together working, and yet I've never known like half of the things that you shared today. That was a really, really precious for me. I really appreciate you being so candid and honest about all those things and your journey. It's much, much richer and you're much more complex than I think anybody realizes. So that's really cool, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you. I mean, I think the authenticity and vulnerability that I've, that music and our culture that I've, tried to embrace is a discipline, right? And continuing to be open and okay with my story, right? Because it's a different story that isn't textbook. We all ultimately have non-textbook stories. It's just a matter of usually how much are we willing to share, I think in a lot of cases, because it's difficult. Our lives, we live in a world that's got good, bad, ugly, all sorts of stuff that comes at us. So thanks. It's been good to share a bit of the story.
Thank you, brother. Yeah. Let's try to get connected this year. Good to see you. Yeah. We can go snowboarding together or something.
Or make some music.
Oh, I'd
make
be
some.
down for that.
We
Yeah.
can make. I remember staying in your house with the cello and the drum set
Oh
up in that
man.
upper room.
Well, you
all
got to
the-
check out my new place in Austin. I have a music room here.
Ooh.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Young.
Thank you for listening to The Girl Dad Show. Please take a moment to follow us on social media. You can find us at The Girl Dad Show on all major platforms. We look forward to staying in touch and keeping you up to date with all the new guests that are coming out.